Clubhouse.
Welcome back to Tales from the Shogunate, a Shogun companion podcast. This is for the 5th episode called Broken to the Fist. This is Paul with Pod Clubhouse, back again with two sisters who've only informed me today that I've been saying their last name incorrectly all these years. It's Vivar. I had no idea.
What? What?
It's pronounced Vivar.
Oh my gosh. See, Gabby.
They may
It's
have told
Gabby
him it was
Vivar.
Vivar, but they were wrong then, weren't they?
All these years.
We are honoring Mel Brooks today, okay?
It's an Igor situation, Inez.
Yes.
Or Inez, depending.
Yes. Inez Vivar. Here we go.
Perfect. Well, this is a follow-up to last week's big sensational ending with the cannons and the people and the horses. If you go to FX's website, where they have a very robust collection of materials that they've assembled for every episode with pictures and synopses and backgrounds of all the characters and all that. You can leaf through the production stills and you can find Jozen with his arms still attached, where they haven't digitally removed them yet. If you want to see that for some reason, you'd be like, oh, wait, where's his arm? It's right there.
I am very interested.
As you have found, Inez, by posting things on our Facebook page, Tales from the Shogunate, they have like that rundown of feudal Japanese weapons that extend just beyond the swords, but the various pole arms and whatnot that they were using at the time. And you posted that handily on our Facebook page.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. They have great content.
Or you could just come to our Facebook page and we'll help you out. Right?
Yes.
We're curated all for you.
Group experts, etc.
That's us. That's us, the dream team.
All right, Broken to the Fist. Let's start things off with a short synopsis, since we got outstanding feedback about that this past week. Or, actually, you know what we could do, guys? We could give a shout out on air to our 5-star review.
Yes, that would be quite lovely.
Bring in the hero.
One Brentley Adams says, I caught the first episode of Shogun and a friend recommended I check out this podcast, which was a great idea. I mean, there's no emphasis on great, but you can tell that it's great. You can tell their knowledge and passion for entertainment and listening to them is a lot of fun. I mean, it's right there, black and white, on iTunes, 5 stars.
Thank you, Brentley. Appreciate it. You know, I know Buntaro says heroism is for the dead, but that's not true for you, sir.
No, it's for our listeners.
Here. Aye.
If you want your name in lights, or at least in digital audio, then all you have to do is leave a 5-star review and we'll read it on our podcast. 1-star reviews, not so much. We'll treat that as more of a inside thing, like a learning event. Gabby and I are going to run down the synopsis of the show quickly. Broken to the Fist starts with Toranaga and his entire entourage returning to Yabu's territory. But he has a friend along with him that no one expected to come back except me, because I don't believe in televised off-screen deaths.
That's right. You were right, Paul. You were freaking right.
So Buntaro, the unwelcome husband of Mariko, man, you see the kind of looks that Blackthorne was giving her, kind of the side eye, like, oh shit.
Yeah, the anti-hero returned.
What's next, Gabby?
There was a scolding of Nagakata, yes? That's his name, right?
Yes.
Yes, Nagakata Yoshi Jr. He was scolded by our man Toranaga, and I can't wait to dive into that part, actually.
That's complicated daimyoing, I think, going on right there. Kind of fathering, kind of daimyoing.
Yeah, kind of one of those moments where I was right. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to talk about.
That'll be the depth of the conversation, was your rightness, but then eventually we'll talk about other aspects of the show.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's only natural. So there is some other stuff that happens, but the meat of this episode, well, half of the meat anyway, takes place at Blackthorne's house. He's got his whole staff humming along now. He's got his chefs, his gardeners, his consort running things for him. But he's also got a lodger. Buntaro has been told to quarter at his house. And tonight is their first dinner together, and it goes great.
And finally, we get a landslide. We got a landslide in this one. Talk about the graphics in that part.
Yeah, that's well put together scene. And it happens pretty much like they describe in the book, with the rolling land kind of overtaking itself, and the devastation in the town following matches kind of what I was expecting to see. But it's still very devastating to think about, that they had to just kind of live with this. It was sort of like this unexplainable thing that just happened and ruined their towns all the time.
Yes, the earthquakes and the dirt, the earth, just trying to kill anybody. Death is in the air, land, and water. That's very sad.
And our final scene features Lady Ochiba returning to Osaka Castle to lay down the law with Ishido about who's running this thing up in here now.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to that because I have a lot of questions. This was a really complex episode, but that was a nice change of pace, especially since we always talk about women, right? And their powerful positions and the different men and how they use women, I suppose. So this is a totally different power dynamic that I'm eager to explore.
Well, and for what it's worth, at least in as far as this point in the book, this is new, which is always a risk when adaptations are made to diverge from the source material, or at least change kind of the timing of events, because they worked in the book, maybe they don't work on screen, or they need to introduce a character sooner than they do in the book, or they just need to make things more appropriate for the day and age that it's being shown.
Meaning it's like historically accurate?
Maybe or not. I'm not totally sure on that.
Yeah, I don't know either, but maybe that's something. We'll have to check it out.
But in the meantime, let's rewind back to the beginning of this episode and chat about some of the first events that came up. All right, so we already mentioned that Toranaga and his army shows up, and this is kind of a oh shit moment. It's kind of the cold open. But the next interesting thing that happened that we didn't mention was that there's another meeting of the regents, and they are snake bit. They can't figure out what to do next. What did you get out of that scene, guys, about their ability to work together?
They can't. That's what we got. It's like typical politics, I suppose, or bureaucratic bullshit, as it's kind of been referred to. I thought it was really interesting that they have a meeting, it's a stalemate, and they, of course, they have to keep having their meetings, but each time it's fewer regions who are willing to even cooperate. So that was sad, interesting, and kind of, I don't know, I kind of totally understood why Toranaga really didn't want to partake in any of the, like, bureaucratic bullshit, I suppose, even though that bullshit does kind of maintain peace.
Yeah, they were kind of being like a little bit catty.
A lot catty, of course.
You know, the seat would stink of country. Well, the seat would then stink of Christian with your guy. And just that being like as far as the progress that they can make. Like they're sitting here in these seats day in and day out. And I'm like, where's the progress?
One thing that I thought was really cool is Ishido. I just love him so much. I mean, the actor and this character, just the way he carries himself, I love it. It's crazy, though, that when we see him in his uniform, or just like even talking to Toranaga or anywhere else other than with the regents, he's just like this scary, badass, just like cutthroat person. Like it's just super intimidating. And then seeing him here with the regents, I feel like I saw or felt a different side of him. Not that there is a different side of him, but just the power dynamic made such a big difference in his energy. And I thought that was really great direction and acting and storytelling.
Right. He wants it. He wants to wield the power himself, which is probably the biggest reason why Toranaga's doing what he's doing, that they are only regents. They are meant to just hold the chair until the heir is old enough. And Ishido is trying to impeach Toranaga, in fact, in this scene, but he can't. Just the law is, and his inability to get the other regents to go along with what he wants. Plus, they don't have that fifth regent sorted out yet.
I don't know. This is really interesting. I'm kind of wondering about Toranaga and whether he actually does like kind of long game want to be Shogun. And Ishido, you know, we've been getting the vibe that he did want it, but now, I mean, seeing how diplomatic he's being, and then I'm just going to quickly skip to the end, right, with Oshiba returning.
Yeah.
He seemed to really like respect her like more than any of the other ones did. It's really interesting. Is Ishido her pawn? Like, is this her long game? Is Toranaga actually afraid of her because she's technically Taiko by proxy of little junior Taiko?
Yeah. And Ochiba and Toranaga have never gotten along. But, you know, on paper, she's not in charge of shit. But Taiko's heir is only a little guy. What is he, 7 or something like that? A little bit older than that?
Yeah, I don't remember the age, but do they really respect her as his guardian? Because Toranaga kept talking about how he feared the regents taking her out and taking her son out for the sake of power. But now that she's in the picture again, I don't know, it doesn't seem like that in this episode.
Paul, I have a quick question. Were you saying that she doesn't get along with him because you know something about, because it's very clear in the book about that?
Well,
or
we
did I miss something?
Episode.
How do I know that they don't get along?
Because when the Taiko was on his deathbed and he told Toranaga that he wanted him to take over and Toranaga said no, she just like gave him like a stank eye the entire time. Had like a lot of
an obvious stank eye?
Yeah, very obvious. And he even said, the Taiko on his deathbed even said, and this part I don't really know more about, but he said, and I thought it was weird, that like, look, you could have had her or something like that. Like he said that it could have been him.
Oh, he was talking about her.
Toranaga, yeah, because isn't she like a consort?
She's a consort. Yeah, she wasn't the Taiko's wife.
So I feel like he did exchange words like that. And that's when Toranaga said to him, oh no, like you've always liked women more or something. Like he said something about like,
she's too pretty for me or something like that.
Yeah. So there was this weird dynamic between the three of them in that episode.
But you're right, Inez, from the book, it is drawn out a little bit more in terms of like the way that their relationship has kind of wound through time. But the result has been that they don't like each other. And he suspects that if she got a chance, she would kill him.
Yeah, and I think that the reason she would do that is because she wants, like, she knows that he is like actually the most powerful because he is the most like loved and respected. And also because the Taiko wanted him to take over singularly anyway, right?
That could be, yeah, rather than the heir, because that kind of messes things up. Even if there's an heir, if you get a powerful daimyo in there, popular daimyo, then you might not need an heir so bad. You know?
Yeah.
So do you think that Toranaga would have her in on whatever kind of thing is he's planning? Like his whole objective is about protecting her son, right? Protecting his heirship to the Taiko, and that this could be like a mutual kind of move between them both, and that it's like a facade about.
Oh my god.
That's interesting.
I mean, don't think so.
I think she needs to do what she has to do to protect her son's interests. But I do believe Toranaga to the extent that he wants the heir to take his father's place. But there's a lot of years between now and then. So what does he do in the meantime? Well, he might have to run things himself, even though he didn't want to, but he just can't trust anybody else.
Do you really? Because I don't know. I'm starting to think that Toranaga actually maybe long game like wants this.
I mean, he keeps saying he doesn't, and he says it a lot, but he
I
sure
think he
is.
doesn't want it.
He says a lot of things. He says
He
a lot
has
of things,
honor.
and then he does. Well,
He's
yeah,
a trickster.
honor for like what's the best for like this country and the future of it. At the end of the day, the little baby Taiko man is the baby. He's a child, and he is going to, like, we don't know who he's going to become and what kind of leader he's going to be. So I think, like, above and beyond this loyalty to the child and like the way of things, I think that he probably cares most about like who can actually get the job done, and he would rather be the mentor than anyone else. And in order to do that, you have to be the shogun, I think.
I mean, that's a reasonable guess.
I will say though that the council scenes didn't provide a lot of new like information for me other than revealing like this kind of cattiness that's going on, which I appreciate that from like a writing perspective and like a humanizing kind of perspective, that like to kind of like remove the romanticization that everybody who's in a political strong position of power acts like a certain way 100% of the time. So I like the cattiness in there. But I think what I like more out of these scenes was getting to see a lot of Ono. He's the one with the leprosy, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just liked physically looking at him like every single time he popped up, because you don't get to see like, I don't know. I just kind of feel like in other stuff I've seen, you see the person's kind of sick, like maybe like once, and they keep him hidden, and they do keep him hidden behind this really like thin sheets and whatnot. But I really appreciated that he got a lot of FaceTime this episode. I enjoyed that makeup work.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's totally beautiful. But speaking of that, of those special effects, yeah, the very first scene that you kind of glossed over, Paul, was the commoners, right, are like picking up the pieces of all these bodies, and like the way they're doing it is just so like normal and natural. And even the conversation between them when they're doing it, which is like, we didn't ask for this, like the old man says as he's like putting pieces of people up in the wheelbarrow thing. So it's just really interesting seeing like the parallels of life like occurring, right? You have like, we've been seeing the palaces in the regions and all these very upper class like samurai and up and their livelihood, but in this episode and in the very first scene, like you're seeing what the actual commoners and slaves, like they're not part of anything, they're just trying to live their lives. Like they're probably the ones that go see these plays that Mariko was talking to Blackthorne about, right? Like they're living their life totally differently, but like they keep having these casualties and collateral damages that they also have to clean up. And so the parallels in this episode, and it started in the very first scene with those like crazy crate like special effects on the body parts and stuff, that was really impactful, I thought, like right off the bat.
I didn't even write them down. I just overlooked their efforts.
Wow.
Yeah, that's elitist.
You are the exact. Thank you. Okay, I'm glad you said it.
I can't help it. I'd rather be, flying falcons with Toranaga.
Well, okay, Yushi Jr., Nagakata Paul. But I will say, though, that this in the meeting with the regents, I thought that it was really funny that Ishido looked so annoyed at, like, the last regent who was there. And, like, the last part is just, like, him coughing. And it just looked like a total waste of time. And I was thinking, like, is he annoyed because I'm like, this motherfucker's gonna die and then we're gonna have to, like, find another regent and have more bureaucratic problems? Or was he just, like... just the general, like, you're annoyed when someone's coughing because it's just like unproductive and loud.
Well, it is big, and it's somebody who like isn't making like your life like easier too. So I think he's just like annoyed with this regent specifically, and then
situation.
he's coughing. Is just like, no, I hate you even more for just being
I
physically annoying.
know. I loved that so much. This scene was so good. Oh, great writing, great direction, beautiful cinematography on it. But okay, the next scene though is like,
well, you got your answer.
Part.
You got your answer. Last week you wondered what is Mariko writing? Well,
I did.
It's a journal to hand over to the boss.
Of course she's doing that. Their relationship in this one was really interesting to me.
Toranaga and Mariko?
Oh, we'll get to that. First, I think we should talk about Naga and like the Falcon story. Can you explain the Falcon story? Because I know what I kind of got out of it, but I don't think that it was like the entire point.
Well, what I got out of it was that a falcon is a tool. It is something that you can use to hunt, like he uses to hunt this pheasant. But you never want to be the falcon. You want to be the man.
Ah.
If you are the man, you want to train your falcon to come to your fist rather than come to just like that bait that he threw on the ground.
Yeah.
So that's like lazy falconing. And he is ashamed that his son became Omi's falcon. Omi pointed him at Jozen, and off he went.
Oh, that's good. And I did appreciate that at the very end he said, but all men can be broken. And that includes himself. And so I did feel like throughout this episode, I saw different breaking points for different men.
There were a few.
Yeah, this episode had so much going on. Some of the breaking points, like one thing that I thought was really cool in this part was that we kind of saw a breaking point with Toranaga as far as like his temper went, right? Like he got annoyed and he yelled at his son, and you have not seen that.
This part in the book was lengthier, and it was really just focused on what they put on TV, which was the being ashamed of Omi fooling him. He couldn't tell if it was Omi, Yabu, or both at this point. But it's not that he killed Jozen. In this part, he kind of says that was a mistake and that will draw their enemies to them, and kind of thinking the same way that we were thinking. But in the book, he was a little more like, yeah, that guy had to go anyway.
Yeah, that's what I gathered here too. And I did say that needed to happen, and he knew it. I think he was just mostly mad that it wasn't actually his call. I think he would have been prouder of his son if he knew that it was his doing rather than being influenced by someone else, because yeah, it had to happen anyway. And that does come up later on when he's talking to Yabu and then promotes Omi.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just thinking like the Bushido world must have been a really tricky place to try to take initiative, because your boss may not like it. Like devastatingly so. He may not like it.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, and at the end of the day, what we know, and it's like in business, it's that confidence and it's the assertiveness. It's not who did the right thing, it's who carries themselves the right way. When you have that confidence and the assertiveness, you can kind of be molded. But when you don't, that's not something that can be taught. And I learned that in Hell's Kitchen with Gordon Ramsay, because he always drops the people who are not confident, even if they're the greatest seasoning chefs or good on one station or whatever. If they're not good leaders, no matter what, even if they don't make a mistake, if they're not good leaders, then they're out. So I think that's the same for here.
Inez, what did you think of the whole scenario with the pheasant? We can just kind of talk about the pheasant all at once.
I really appreciate this entire storyline here, because you all know that that's kind of been my obsession was it has been about like the cultural pieces. I'm looking for like the historical. I kind of leave like the creative storytelling pieces to you, while I get to enjoy like the nuances of operations, logistics, culture, the sociology of what's going on, and everything about this pheasant was such a great storytelling all across. It was so dynamic, right? We have this pheasant, Blackthorne he's just like, oh, the Toranaga gave it to us directly, so it must be like the best pheasant ever.
Yeah, that was really sad.
Right. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of headspace of like where he is, because we all saw just in the scene before, like, yeah, just like go ahead and give that to the Anjin.
We take for granted, but they don't eat meat, so they don't know what to do with meat.
So is there something more about this in the book, Paul? Like about why he did it? Like why he even chose to give him a pheasant? Did they have a conversation
to reward him? Because his policy with Blackthorne, as long as Blackthorne is kind of reciprocating, he keeps rewarding him because he doesn't want him to leave. He's not done getting what he can out of the guy, you know? And so, yeah, the pheasant was just another series of rewards.
So I love watching everybody's reaction about what to do. I think one of my favorite scenes, it was a short little moment, but it was Fuji that was just like telling everybody, we need to go get like his own utilities, his own knives, because he is not touching anything that belongs to like what everybody else can eat. But I love watching her like be a house manager and like telling people like, this is like what we're going to do. I love all of that stuff. I watch Real Housewives. You know, I've seen the Real Housewives, Salt Lake City, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I saw mostly Beverly Hills, but you know, these like the women, I guess, being the consorts of their home, like orchestrating a bunch of things and making these things happen, and getting to see Fuji take her role seriously from start to finish has been so great. She was one of my favorite characters this episode. But yeah, gosh. Talk about like when you don't know the culture and you're in a position of power with the group that will like take your words seriously. It was so tragic. You know, it was funny when he translated no touch, die for the peasant.
Yeah.
And then learning from, I think it was Fuji or who was explaining to him.
Fuji had to explain. Yeah.
Right. Explaining to him like how they negotiated amongst themselves as a team to see who was going to.
Yeah, isn't that right? Fuji tried to explain, but Mariko had to say all the words like the day after. Isn't that? Yeah, right before the.
Oh man, I cannot remember.
Yeah, that's what happened. But yeah, Fuji tried. Mariko had to, because she had the complete story with the headsman and stealing it and all that.
Anjin having to face accountability was like another part of like that journey. But it started so comical, right? They started the episode as just really comical, but it really did make its way all through the episode in its own really beautiful storytelling way that was filled with like more comedy in between, disgust, because I definitely was super cringy. Him offering up this like disgusting stew to everybody.
He actually cleans the bird in the book. So it's actually quite a bit more descriptive in terms of like taking off the skin and all the other parts of that process, which I'm glad they kind of left out of this. He just put it on the spike or whatever it was to hang outside and rot, which is what happened in the book, but it was a little more graphic about how it got there.
I really loved how they were saying like your word is law and we respect like what you want done in your house, but we also have a duty to the community that peace cannot be disturbed by the smell that's causing. And then so we negotiated how we were going to solve this problem. And it was, I don't know, it was just, I love the storytelling of this whole pheasant line. Gabby,
do you remember we met the gardener
yes.
an episode or two ago when she had to correct him that we don't call him Sama?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was the man that we met on the road outside the house.
And then they had a sweet interaction in the beginning of this episode as well, or at least the beginning of the scene.
Yeah, he was placing that rock.
Mm-hmm. And he said that it was interesting. He made that comment about how rocks are important because otherwise a garden is just for growing. And so that was really interesting to me because I thought, okay, what is wrong with growth? What is wrong with only growth, mere growth? I think I did think about that and I came up to a conclusion, but actually talking about what you guys were discussing about just how this whole episode played out and led to the like the storyline of the pheasant, which I think was the main story of this episode, really. Okay, the first time I watched it, I was absolutely devastated. I don't know if you've noticed beginning like me and this podcast so far, I'm just like really, really, I don't know, like calm, somber. And it's because there were two things that really fucking happened in it. And the first one was just like depression. Like I was just so attached to everybody, like care for every character, and so much like real raw events, like real life events every day, like happened, interactions, character development, it all happened. And then at the end, right, we lost our gardener. But I watched it again and I now have a completely different vibe because I'm viewing it all like as this huge strategy and how everybody had a purpose, including the gardener. And so now I'm not like saddened by it at all. So I'm like super conflicted right now because I'm processing like how both of those feelings and emotions like are happening. I just finished watching it right before we started podcasting. And so, yeah, I think that the gardener, I don't think that it was such a tragic situation. I think that the gardener and the spy, the fisherman, like took this as an opportunity to give the gardener a purpose and made him the scapegoat to feed to Yabu,
Right. Yeah.
and kind of close that up. And I think that the gardener like was completely aware of it, and he was already sick, so he like wanted this. And the guy who's the head of the town, right, that was the fisherman, and the fisherman like had a duty, and he had to find a spy like to scapegoat, which I do think that the gardener is a spy. I think that there are multiple spies, but maybe just the fisherman is like the main messenger. However, it was kind of like a deep, beautiful, purposeful act at the end, because Mariko said that he gave himself for a greater purpose. And at first, I had no idea what the fuck she was talking about. I thought, okay, like he did it so that the town would not have to smell shit and a curse. But he did that, and he also did it like for Toranaga and Yabu, like to kind of hold things down, because Yabu was going to start being extra crazy, and they need to control this for their long game, which is winning this huge battle that everyone knows is going to happen. And also, like, this guy, the gardener, he fought in Korea. So, like, he's like a samurai. Because the commoners, like, with these great battles that would happen, and all these battles that happened, like, before this timeline, like, historically, the commoners, like, were part of the army, and some of them were really trained. And the ones who were trained really well, like, were the ones that won. And so I'm assuming that maybe, like, Toranaga's fisherman, like, he said he was one of that fisherman was Toranaga's prized samurai. And I don't know why, like, maybe I don't know why not, that wouldn't be the case for, like, some other commoners that exist there. And so I feel like that guy like was basically a samurai, because he was trained by samurai in the past, like before this, during their wartime. And then now we have implied context with the fisherman and the gardener. However, because they are commoners and you can't really rise to certain levels because of class, I think that it was a huge honor for the gardener to be that sacrifice for the people, for the peace, for the curse, for Yabu's wrath, and for Toranaga, because he was serving Toranaga at the end of the day.
He was. The spy scenes, there's a couple extra bits there. You know, when Yabu and Omi are tossing the first suspect's house, and there's that discussion about the cannon regiment being assigned to Omi, and Yabu's like, yeah, that's mine. Yeah. You know, what's yours is mine, Omi.
That was really funny and sad for Omi.
It was, but it's you see how it's all twisting together, you know, by this spy business lasted just long enough to kind of make Yabu nuts. And then that affected how he treated Omi. You know, a couple nights ago, he's like, hey, go put this thing in Naga's ear and get him to kill Jozen for us. And so they were like besties.
Wait, you think that that wasn't Yabu's plan, that was Omi's plan?
Well, I might be confusing things, because it was definitely Yabu's plan to tell Omi to do it, from the book anyway.
Yeah, no, I guess from the book, I just got the impression, I mean, because Omi was the one who like said that he had the idea and like, you know, was going to tell it to what's his face.
And it seemed like whoever came up with the idea was going to get into trouble. That's when Yabu was like, it was Omi, totally all Omi. And then Toranaga was like, yeah, that guy needs to be rewarded. Whatever idea that was should be rewarded. I guess it's Omi then.
But I thought it was Omi's.
No, I think it was Yabu pulling the string, and Omi was the same age as Naga, or closer to age anyway. And so he did it.
He planted the seed.
Yeah, but now you get this conflict, right, where Yabu is kind of losing his shit, and Toranaga, on the other hand, is rewarding Omi, creating conflict in their little reporting system.
Yeah, I'm sure he's doing it intentionally really did push Yabu because he still isn't super convinced of like where he stands. Like you get a sense that he's still constantly assessing where he is, like what's he going to do. He's asking him straight up, but then I feel like the moves with promoting Omi aren't necessarily because Omi's so great, even though this was his plan and he achieved it. I don't know if he's rewarding him for that more than he's like doing it strategically because he now knows that Omi is kind of has a little bit of a looseness to him and he wants to have a tighter connection on him, maybe a tighter rope and visibility maybe, but he's still young enough that if he influences him with awarding him this regiment because he's saying I like what happened with the Jozen situation, then it's about trying to make sure that Omi stays motivated to stay on his side perhaps.
Yeah, that's definitely some of it, but I really do think that a lot of it and most of it is probably just fucking with Yabu and waiting for him to finally show himself because Toranaga knows that Yabu is playing both sides and is probably loyal to Ishido, but he's not going to do anything outwardly about it because he's going to get murdered by Toranaga. But until then, Toranaga is using him because he can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like because like how certain is Toranaga also that this also is keeping Yabu unfavorable in the eyes of the council by having eventually it make it word to Osaka that his nephew is in charge of this brand new regiment or something.
Yes, he's definitely. I think that's his
like he's sabotaging Yabu.
Yeah, I think that's his longing to destroy all those connections because he knows that this guy is a loose cannon.
Right. He needs his men, but he doesn't need disloyalty to get them.
And you know what? Toranaga is sneaky, right? And so you guys did say it earlier a few minutes ago that like, or Inez maybe, like what if Oshiba and Toranaga are doing this on purpose in order to, is that what you were saying, in order to create the war?
That Inez had that idea.
Yeah, you know what, maybe that is the case. Maybe they are setting up Ishido because
that'd be a great twist, because if you recall, the reason they called Toranaga to report to the regents in Osaka was because she was in his castle in Edo.
Yeah, and she was, right? Because Toranaga, he has all those family ties, and one of her, I forgot who it is, her sister or something, had a baby with one of his family members. Something like that. I need to look at my notes. And so that's why she was there, obviously. But these marital ties, right? They could go two ways, obviously, where you have the person who's married into it is a spy, or a spy against the people they're married to, or it's they're spending a lot of time together. Toranaga isn't the most disrespectful person to women, so maybe there is something else going on between them, and maybe she does think that Ishido, if he was shogun, that he would want to keep it because he's very ambitious, and Toranaga was, I guess, the most loyal to the Taiko, and the Taiko did respect him. So maybe she is partial to Toranaga because of that. He's most likely to not murder her son. This is very interesting. Many puppeteers. So yeah, I'm gonna play with that.
We need to see her do more stuff on screen to get a better sense, but I don't see why that can't work. We haven't seen anything that would contradict it, really, except for them not seeming to like each other. But wouldn't that be the way that you play that in this scenario?
Yes. They are all so layered in everything. The eightfold fence, right? And the three hearts. Who holds all these hearts? Where are all their hearts?
Speaking of hearts, things get complicated at Blackthorne's house with Buntaro dropping by because apparently he has to bunk there. What did you guys think of dinner at Blackthorne's house?
Before I get into that, Paul, I want to ask you, you said, I hate the off-screen death. Right. And you were right on the money. Cinematic, predictability came to Paul. Well done. But how do you feel seeing him back? Are you angry still?
He's not a likable guy. And he slapped Mariko around. I think it's not going to work out this way for the show, but I'll tell you, in the book, she stayed in her room for a week. That's a pretty good beating. I think he has a role to play. I don't think it's just as a warrior, because they've got a lot of warriors and he's a tough warrior, but I think he's got something more important than that coming up, why he needed to survive. But God, is he a dislikable guy? Unlikable, dislikable. Did I make up a word?
He sucks.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. I mean, from the moment he sits down, he's like teasing Blackthorne about the way that he eats. He's eats like a baby monkey. That's not a compliment.
I mean, everybody else has kind of like gotten used to Blackthorne, but you know, he's just now getting caught up. So he doesn't have all the trust and rapport and progress that Blackthorne's been making with everybody else. So it's understandable that he's still stuck on his last interaction with him which was like escort the prisoner Blackthorne or whatever, you know, to the boat, that he ended up having to like, you know, we were, all of us were like in mourning on that episode about his potential death, right? It was such a beautiful, honorable scene, and we were like, we acknowledge that you are like an amazing ass kicker. And then to know, like, we saw him swarmed with a lot of fucking people, and he made it out. And they said, what, by the end of it, there was like 2 people alive by the time that he like made it back. Like, he just went through some really horrible shit, and now he has to be a guest in this barbarian that he's only met like a couple days. You know, in his mind, it's been only 1 day's worth of interaction. And I don't know, this guy's got PTSD too. I'm not excusing like all the stuff, but like, oh my God, like he went through a lot.
There's a couple of things about this scene that need a little more explanation. One is that I guess in Japanese culture now and all the way back then, you are granted a certain amount of license for jackass behavior while drunk. It's just a thing. As long as you don't kill anybody, then it's kind of forgiven.
And so would that be because they believe so much like in curses?
You know, I don't know. I don't know that part of it. I just know that I've seen it here and I've seen it in other sources, like the tradition of modern Japanese middle class. They work and then they go out and get stinking drunk, and all together from the office. So there's that. Another aspect is that Blackthorne is accustomed to Western type liquor, and he has a really high tolerance for much stronger stuff than sake. No matter how big Buntaro is, he was always going to outdrink him, no matter what.
This was such a crazy scene. I like labeled it the pissing contest when I was,
Oh, I called it dick measuring, but yeah, I think we're on the same page.
Yeah. So there was a lot to this one. So the whole time that they're drinking, Blackthorne is loosening up, and he's getting like friendlier and happier because culturally that's how it goes for them or him. But then Buntaro was getting angrier, obviously, because yes, he has like all this PTSD and just the culture. This was really conflicting, this entire scene for me, because on one hand I'm appreciating like seeing Anjin Blackthorne just like be more of himself and feel more comfortable in his own skin there, but at the same time the women seemed incredibly afraid, just so frightened in their eyes, and it was painful for me to watch him just sabotaging and fucking up and being so careless just because. The more drunk that they got, and Buntaro, like, he got looser as well, but looser meant he was getting angrier, and so both of them became more inhibited, and the more inhibited they became, the more danger the women were in.
They're less inhibited.
The less inhibited they're in, the more in danger the women were in. And I just like saw that happening simultaneously, and it was really, really sad and finally and scary. So what set off Buntaro? Was it that she walked away? Like, that's what I gathered, that she walked away from him and she disobeyed him because he was already pissed about Blackthorne this entire time. But when Mariko like finally became vulnerable and started crying, which she's not gonna do that in front of anybody, so she walked away, which is so sad that she's all about that eightfold fence and she just like did it because she didn't want to give Buntaro like the satisfaction of seeing him break her. So she walked away, and then knowing that he was going to physically break her, because obviously this is a common theme in their relationship. It was very, very heartbreaking for me to watch this, but it was so, beautifully crafted, like production wise.
Well, I have to wonder, and this is not informed by anything from the book because this went down just like it did. I have to wonder if Buntaro did not pick up on any goo eyes between Mariko and Blackthorne, or specifically more like Blackthorne to Mariko. Because you're right, there is kind of a question mark because he makes her sort of debase herself by telling this embarrassing story about how her dad dishonored the entire family. She was only spared. It's a subtle thing, but it's because she was ironically, it's because she was married to Buntaro. So basically his family now. Yeah. That's what saved her from being part of her father's, whatever you call it, culling, by having to eliminate his whole line. If she hadn't been married, she would have been killed too.
Yeah. So what is his angle, right? So some might say that he, is ordering her to stay alive because he loves her. But do you think that it's because he hates her and like he wants to punish her? Because he, honor is the most important thing. And her father killed the Taiko at the time. And for him, that was for honor and the greater good of the country. And things did improve after that. So he wasn't wrong in doing that ethically from one moral standpoint. However, if you're just following the rules as like they do, then he obviously did like the one thing that you really shouldn't do. And that's why you have the ultimate punishment. And she was his wife. She is his wife. And so that's bringing shame to him and his family, her association. So like, I think that he doesn't love her. And I don't think the reason he's keeping her alive is because he loves her. I think it's because he hates her. And it's going to be worse for him if she's dead, like as far as his reputation goes, than if she's alive and well controlled.
I agree with a lot of that. She might be alive because of like Toranaga, right? He has some kind of like affinity for her. She's got really great utility. And at the end of the day, Buntaro reports to him. So I can see an order being cascaded down for it being like somebody else's will. But I do believe that from like the honor perspective, he's the guy who's married to something disgusting, something that's the way that he talks about her family, right? Mm-hmm. And talks about her and talks down to her. Imagine that that's like what all of Japan thinks when they hear that family name, and he's the only one alive and he has to keep that. So, and then he's such an honorable, hardcore, like committed soldier to his group, that so I can see like that you and everybody in this culture is suppressing all of their emotions, especially the men in particular. Here is, I got like the eightfold fence and I also felt like the tragedy, but he's not in a position to be able to be like fully expressive like a Toranaga might be. How emboldened Yabu is. Buntaro is different. He's even more of like a stone.
Oh, you know what? Paul and Inez.
What?
So she's absolutely going to die. She's gonna die soon because the only Inez, like you just said it, like this is the greater purpose thing. You know what? What if this is a long game thing? Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm ready to spill. So, she said that Toranaga, like, cause she wants to seppuku, like she wants to do that to
she
herself.
asks every year.
Yeah, she asks him every year, but she made a deal with Toranaga. She said that in the beginning, that he's promised that she could like fulfill her purpose. Like that's why she's like going along with all of this. She said that to Fuji in the very beginning when she like said, now you have another purpose and it's to live. And then she mentioned how like Toranaga gave her another purpose. And then when she talked to Blackthorne, when she was in all of this, like deciding to participate with all of it, she said that like he promised her that she could fulfill her purpose. And she's been saying that her ultimate end, like what she wishes for, right, is seppuku, like for just ending all of this pain, because she's just so traumatized that there's nothing that can happen in her life that is going to outweigh or fix anything. She can't just like move to Europe and like live happily ever after with Blackthorne, like going to see shows. So she's totally gonna die, and that's the whole goal. And Toranaga, like later on in this episode, when she talked to him and said like it was her fault that she pissed off Buntaro, and Toranaga like made that comment, which was, okay, he can do whatever he wants with his wife, but he can't fuck with my translator. So that could be taken two ways. It could be taken of like he has like this affinity and wants to protect her, and he's like all nice to women, but I don't know, because he's a very hard man, and this hard man is like about to take over everything. He makes a lot of big decisions, and death is very, very just part of life and nonchalant and just fine. So I don't actually think that he like cares for her any more than her utility. And I think that he's like 100% planning, like maybe he's even like annoyed at whatever little bullshit she might be having, like this drama with her husband and all this stuff, just because to him she does have a greater goal, and he knows that she owes him everything. If anything, like she's the most loyal person that there is, because like she has one end goal. She's already dead being alive because of all of the shame, and so she is like his ultimate sacrifice. And she's really, really smart. She speaks different languages. Her critical thinking is amazing. I think that he's setting her up to die in a very purposeful way for him.
So she's just another falcon to send.
I do think that. But she's
Oh,
a
100%.
more valuable one. And it's just like really sad, because this whole time I'm wanting there to be, Blackthorne, I know that he cares about her, and I know Fuji cares about her, but she doesn't care about herself, and she doesn't care about anything because she can't. I've been hoping that there was like, oh, there's like respect for women or something, but no, like I don't think that there is. We saw another side of Toranaga that I did appreciate in this episode, because he's not an emotional man at all, and they showed that.
Falling down like a 40-foot chasm.
Yeah. So that was after he was rude.
Oh, that's right. That is exactly right. But we'll get there. All right. Finishing out the scene at Blackthorne's house, though, we have Buntaro blaming his behavior on Saki. And I think one of the missing subtexts that you might not get is that in a weird way, Blackthorne outranks him. Even though Buntaro is samurai and has men that under his control in like a military sense and all that, but I don't think he's Hatamoto. He is not.
Oh no, of course not.
With being Hatamoto, he can't do anything. It'd be like hitting a made man, right? You can't do that. So that's why he kneels and begs forgiveness.
Yeah, so there was a lot of meaning in that. Gosh, there's so much meaning in everything. Like, so, him being so shit-faced, right? Drunk on Saki, Buntaro, and shooting the arrow through the exact same hole and hitting the post that he couldn't even see when he's shit-faced. Like, that did show you just this level of warrior and skill that this man has. But also how even at his worst, he's still so restrained. Yes, Blackthorne is Hatamoto, but Jesus Christ, like that is such a saving grace, because this other guy, Buntaro, is just like this unstoppable, like RoboCop figure. He's oh my gosh, he's just really, really composed. Like he's really keeping it together even when he's tearing things apart. And so what was really symbolic in this was the fact that, like, I noticed that they made it a point to show that when he steps off of the step from the house onto the ground, like he has other people putting his shoes on. So with him, I really liked how they're showing like the actual status, like the levels, right? Because he knows how the like groundskeepers are supposed to treat him, and he makes that so far we've seen Blackthorne and women in the home, and it's not as like hierarchical. And so with Buntaro there, like you realize, oh no, there really are rules that like they're not following, and that's not allowed. And so I appreciated that he was like kind of a control. But the reason why they put their shoes on outside and take them off outside is just they're always worn only outside. You don't wear your shoes inside, is because like you should not, in the Japanese culture, you should not dirty your floor indoors, and you're not dirtying it just with dirt. It's just like the ground, like evil spirits live in the ground, in the soil. And so you have to have a barrier there. And so the fact that he knows this, he's practiced it. We saw how important it was for him to have other people put the shoes on his feet. And then when he was apologizing to Blackthorne, he removed his shoes and put them down. So that's why I mentioned that, Paul, earlier about how blaming it on the sake and why that's the case. Like, because I think because he knows that there are evil spirits in the soil, and maybe he already has evil spirits like inside of him. But I know that when he took off his shoes and like placed his bare feet on the ground, he was like accepting that the evil spirits, they were already in him and they needed to like go, or maybe he was just the same as them.
Good catch, man. Totally flew right by me. Yeah.
I mean, those shoes, like this, the costume design on this, oh my God, it's phenomenal. So I'm really paying attention to all of these things. And yeah, like the shoes between the commoners and the shoes that they wear inside the house, like it's really powerful for me, like when I watch all of this stuff. But yeah, like the arrow and the fact that he's showing them his power. Like you had this huge demonstration, and then boom, the complete total opposite, where he's like, you can take my life right now. And then Blackthorne didn't do anything. And so do you think he didn't do anything because he was just like so culture shocked? Or do you think it was because like he respected him for that? Or do you think it's because like he knows that he shouldn't do anything to him because he's really valuable and they're all about to go into a war and they know it? Or all of the above?
It looked like he was upset that Buntaro wasn't going to fight him, so he wasn't going to fight somebody who wasn't going to back. But I feel like he wanted a reason to like beat somebody up, which I guess it's like very English, right? Isn't that?
If he would have turned around with his sword out, he'd have blown him away because he carried a pistol out there.
Well, yeah, but seeing that happen to this person that you really like, I feel like could be reason for a drunk person to want to like at least slap someone around because you know that you can.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you guys are all nailing all the aspects to it. The semi-acceptance of the sake explanation, the not wanting to fight a guy that won't fight back, the consequences of blowing this guy away with your host, Toranaga. I don't know if that one is running through his head right then because he did bring a pistol out there. But yeah, all that stuff combined.
There was actually this other interesting part that I found in that scene was Mariko, like she did not have to translate that last part.
Oh, he begged her. He said, don't tell me the story. Tell me something else. He won't know.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying she did not have to translate the part where she said that a man should have more courtesy toward his wife. That's the part where I think Buntaro is like, what the fuck? This is my property. Nobody talks about my property. This barbarian. Like, I think maybe that's where he started thinking, like, Fuji already said that Blackthorne is not pillowing with her. So I feel like that added some form of jealousy, and she knew that was happening, and she knows that she's pissing him off. She knows what happens when she pisses him off. So there was something in there, like she could have said anything else to him that would not have pissed him off so much. But that is what caused him to force her to tell Blackthorne like the story of her family. So that was the trigger right there. Was that Blackthorne politely said, hey, I wouldn't do that to my woman. She did not have to fucking say that. There's a lot of meaning behind that. And it's like kind of a complicated for Mariko, but she had all the power there. And so it just makes me think like, is she doing this because like she feels like she deserved some form of punishment, or was she just finally somewhat indirectly standing up for herself a little tiny bit, just showing her vulnerability a little bit, and then ended up being punished for it? Because like the house is cursed, Blackthorne just being around is like fucking up everything about their culture. And like, although she understands his language and she does have an affinity to him, she also is very, very honorable to her culture and loyal to it. And so she and Fuji both know that he's just like the worst for them. He's dangerous for them. He's dangerous for the village. He's dangerous for everybody, but it's a risk. It's a double-edged sword, but it's a risk that like they hope is going to pay off.
Now, why she decided to translate that part, that is a great question.
Do you think that she is willing to also die early by his hand, by somebody, since she can't do it herself? Is she provoking him intentionally to also do that?
Or to tell her that she's allowed to?
Or maybe, yeah, trying to. But yeah, you're right, because we've seen her be super calculated on how she translates that. That's one of my favorite things that I also wrote down about this episode, was I really love her translations. Sometimes she's just like perfectly word for word, and then she other times is twisting it to be like polite and matches like their culture kind of language. Like she's putting in the tones of and verbiage for them to understand, and it's very poetic sometimes. And yeah, and then other times she just straight up doesn't translate. So why did she choose this opportunity to do that?
Right after Blackthorne passed out and she was being beaten by him or yelling at her, "This is your fault. Do you understand? Say something." Like, he's obviously really frustrated that she's not giving him any reaction. But when Blackthorne came in, she did say he should not have seen this. So what was she talking about that he saw?
I thought it was
disrupted everything.
Oh, I thought it was that Blackthorne saw her
That was
bloodied.
Blackthorne saw her. Oh my god!
Right, because Fuji said, I tried to keep him out, but he came in anyway.
I thought she was talking about she tried to keep Buntaro out, but she was talking about keeping.
She couldn't do anything about
out?
Buntaro. That's just
Oh my gosh! Why in the world do you think that she said that he should not have seen it because of like the vulnerability component, where like they are forming something with each other, like a different level of care, or what's the reason for that? Is it like a cultural thing?
I assume it's going to be cultural, because this is a very intimate scene. This is something that is like a legitimate way of conducting from husband to their property wife.
That's right.
And so it's private thing, and it's not any of his place to say. And then I think also because she was extra, like we saw her have a lot of fire, in that recovery. Like she's like a really bad, like wounded animal that's like snappy, right? Like she snaps at Blackthorne and at Fuji, and then Fuji's like, you're disturbing the peace of the house and I won't allow that kind of thing, right? Like you bring dishonor for disturbing the peace. And then she's like broken. She's just like, what honor is there?
She said it doesn't even matter. The house is cursed,
yeah, the house is cursed. And I think maybe part of her saying that is also that she had no longer any composure to her eightfold defense is like destroyed in that moment. She has no way of like hiding.
Right, and she can't do that. That's not the way. Oh my gosh, just such a horrible scene, but so great. Just this writing, the acting, everything. It's just, I don't know. I feel bad saying it's great and beautiful, but it is. I'm like, get detached, Gabby. Compartmentalize.
Caroline won't watch stuff like this. She says, "Why are you entertained by watching women get beat?" I'm like, it's not that exactly. I'm not entertained by that, but what the scenes, the storytelling. But yeah, she can't even stomach the beating part of it.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Yeah, very conflicted. They were emphasizing the movements of the women, especially, you've seen them glide, right? Because that's how they walked. But they've been showing us like how exactly right, like the tiny steps. I feel like they made more emphasis on a lot of those glides in this episode. It was really beautiful being able to appreciate this culture in this way that we absolutely like haven't before and couldn't unless like they themselves were showing it to us, because we don't have a lot of Japanese productions hit popularity over here. I guess I can definitely do my research, but
No, I think you're right.
I'm really, super grateful for, Yuki Sanada. It was really cute, kind of like reading an interview that he had done, because, they asked him, like, what is it about being a producer on the show that he enjoys or is different, because he's had this vastly successful acting career. And he says the fact that I just get to say whatever I want anytime I want to like get this right. And I really appreciate that he finally has his moment to shine. Like, it feels like it's really late. I've known about him for a long time, and seeing him front and center finally, and then he's a big part of this entire vision for this show, just like makes it just like extra warm. Like, he's like finally, like, everybody in film has failed him before, and like this is it. This is like a massively beautiful legacy.
And it more it needs to just keep coming, because I don't know, he's already had such an impact, and so it's just gonna keep growing, and it needs to keep growing, because this is so spectacular and we need it. We American fools need this and need him and need more like him.
Or just, the level of care taken to make products, shows, movies, whatever, that take the care. If they're going to represent a culture outside our own here, then, be careful about it.
Yeah, you can have a really badass story without whitewashing it, without cheapening,
that's not the American
things.
way.
I think that's what's showing this is that like hello, like you can still have an amazing impact being authentic to whatever like the roots are, because that is like the most interesting thing for a lot of people about the show. Is the story is a part of it, but I think what people are really into is the details of everything that we're seeing in the storytelling. Like, I really love the landslide scene. We can transition like there. Like, I just did this road trip, as you know, because I podcasted from the Grand Canyon last time, right? All throughout the roads, I'm seeing these signs always that was like, watch out for like landslide, or watch out for falling rocks. And every single time I see them, I create an image in my mind of what I think that might look like. Every time I read an article about landslides or mudslides that have happened, I don't see like the slide happening. I see the aftermath. Sorry for people who have had to go through like, landslides and these kind of things, but I fucking loved seeing it. And it wasn't like a super quick thing. It was this like really vivid, and it didn't look like cheap CGI to me. It looked awesome. Seeing like the land like moving, and at one point looking like a river, and even like down to like how they had to like physically like dig him out, was like, those are some great details.
And there was so much significance to that scene, and the fact that they had to dig him out, because so far it's been over and over, like it's been stated by Mariko that we live and we die and control nothing. But right after that happened, Toranaga should have died and would have died. And ironically, what saved him was not his sword, it was his fan. That is not a weapon. That is like a nothing. Also, Blackthorne found him because of the fan, and then he dug him out and he kind of like resuscitated him. He knocked the dirt out of his mouth. And so, and Toranaga was like, what the fuck? Like, this guy, this thing, this barbarian in the dungeon. Yeah, that was, oh my gosh, that was huge. And I'm like, oh my, look at this, you guys. This white man from over there, like, who just keeps coming out with these tactics. There's so much utility to him, and right there he cheated death because this guy did this thing. And so he's showing them that there is more to life to like living and then dying, and that you can like not be reborn, but kind of reborn. He birthed out of the earth and then took his first breath again. I don't know. I found some symbolism in there.
I wonder if there's anything to read into the timing of the quakes, because the last tremor happened when Mariko and Blackthorne were having kind of a heated discussion. I don't remember the subject matter, but they were kind of disagreeing with each other. And then a small tremor happened, and they were like, oh, well, let's focus on other things after that. And then this one, she's telling him about the way things went down at his house. He had just asked Toranaga if he can just get the fuck out of here because, he dealt with Buntaro the night before and has no idea how to act here anymore. And it's not fun anymore. And so they're having sort of a tense discussion. And then here comes another earthquake. I wonder if that's just some narrative tool that's going to keep happening.
Yeah, or like just foreshadowing to like an additional enemy in the storyline, which is like that the one thing they can't plan for is how to deal with earthquakes, kind of thing. So I and because they were totally prepared. It always catches them off guard, but like look at how like badly it took out Toranaga and his entourage, you called it, right? It's like his town and the 1,000+ soldiers, like, everybody tumbling, falling around everywhere. And, Japan is located on the Pacific Ring of Fire. So there's high seismic activity over there. And then it's an area that experiences a lot of heavy rainfall and has active volcanoes. So maybe we'll see a volcano later on.
Oh, that's right. If we could take it back a little bit, because you just mentioned, Paul, like that they had like that heated discussion on the coast, and it did remind me of a conversation that she had with him right when he found her. So after this happened with Buntaro, where he abused her, right? She left, and because she left, he was not there to appropriately relay his message to Fuji about the pheasant, right? So that kind of like started a snowball effect, the fact that she just took off and then now this poor villager is going to die. And so because she wasn't there, he wasn't able to relay that to Fuji. And then when he met up with her, which was at like that little coast where she likes to go meditate, I thought it was really interesting that they mentioned the eightfold fence again. He mentioned it and he said, my life is mine, yours is yours. If you can't see that, you'll never be free of this prison. And her response was, no, it's you who's in prison. If freedom is all you ever live for, you'll never be free of yourself. And so this scene was also, I was so conflicted with this one too, just because it was really sad to me that, when she let him know what the eightfold fence was in the previous episode, I thought, okay, they're like bonding. Look at me over here, just like rooting for these two to be together. So I saw them bonding. I thought, okay, maybe there's like cultural overlap and there's going to be growth and whatnot. But then this scene, you see that it's just divided them even more because he still believes that like their way is unnatural and wrong, which goes to show with what you've been saying, Paul, is that at any moment, if he was allowed to get on a ship and take off, he totally would. And it was really interesting that he's over here like advocating for mental health to her, and she's also doing the same thing. But obviously, like, because of where they live, the culture that's there, I mean, it's just been like this since like the beginning of time for them. And so she can't even fathom his existence and he can't even fathom her existence. And this was the first time that like you saw what the actual divide is between them. And then you saw what happens when this divide occurs, right? Which you see like she wasn't there, and then the mistranslation, and then our guy ends up dying. Like there's everyone in the house was suffering because of the pheasant, and then it's just a snowball effect to like lots of bad events. This moment was really symbolic of this is the divide. And we just haven't seen that. We've seen them come together up until this point, and then here's where the divide started happening. When he came back and I saw Fuji, I was so incredibly heartbroken. So even though I think that it was completely a staged, planned death for Ujiro for like sake of purpose and honor and dying that way, I don't think like Fuji and the household knew that. And so the fact that they used Fuji as a pawn to do this fucking thing that like is gonna destroy her even more, which like why does that need to happen? Right? Like she already lost so much, but it's like, oh, it's because like you're useful, Fuji. And so that again, like I'm feeling so many things when I'm watching this, and there's like 5 different things happening with one character at the same time, and it's so complicated, and I'm just like gutted and then also appreciating it a ton. But Fuji's sad, oh my god. And then skipping to the end where like he came back to her and she had so much guilt that she asked Blackthorne, please like kill me. I am horrible. I did this horrible thing because I had to. I don't like it. Like she's carrying the fucking guilt that all these men are like throwing at her and forcing her. And so she also has all this PTSD where she's just like, I want to die. So again, is Toranaga like, you know what? I like these extra vulnerable women because they are super loyal. They are badasses, but they also want to die. So when it's their time, it's going to be easy and really useful to me. Is that what's going on?
Wow, that's cynical. You connected a lot of dots there that were right there, but I didn't grab them all. But they all make sense the way you laid it out.
Yeah, man. Oh my god. As I'm watching it, I'm just like, like they're all coming in my head at the same time. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to feel.
As you were talking, I am remembering that it was Blackthorne's conversation with Fuji directly in the very broken translation, right, of her telling him that, like, you know, the gardener's dead. I really appreciated that we were seeing like a lot of villagers mourning him. It wasn't just like, oh, he's dead because, like you said, the rules. Like, I love that it was a lot of intentional purpose of showing, like, even though when she explained it all, it was so logical, and they just all like we talked about it and decided this is the right thing to do because felt he was already sick, so he volunteered. Like, it's so logical. So it's like, okay, this is how we're going to solve this problem. And then they executed it, but you're still seeing like everybody's like mourning and feeling like all this horrible sadness around it. And I really appreciated that element being like obvious in this storyline. I also really enjoyed the scene at the end, or toward the end, like after the landslide, when she's on her when Fuji's on her stomach getting treated for an injury on her back, and you know, she looks at her hand as he like pats her to give her some affection or reassurances because he's also shocked about everything that's going on, and she just kept staring at her hand. Yeah, and so I was just like, what's going on in her head in that moment?
Her yet.
Right, exactly.
So there is something about, like, you know, when you touch, like, you feel the energy. She felt the compassion. She was super, super vulnerable. Like, she almost died. So there was this compassion that happened. And what you mentioned about the villagers mourning, so that's interesting, right? Because the villagers are allowed to do that. They're, like, allowed to basically be free. I mean, they are, like, slaves, most of them, and if they're not technically slaves, they're practically slaves, but they're like allowed to show their emotions more than anybody who like has a role and a job, especially if they're a woman. And so it was interesting in this episode because they're not isolated in their little palace area where it's just a bunch of upper class people, but you saw the mix, and so everyone seemed a bit more like human and vulnerable, which like obviously they were a lot more comfortable. The women would have been, actually everyone would have been a lot more comfortable if you did not have someone like Buntaro there who was enforcing the order. Like, it would have been a completely different, pleasant, not realistic for them life. And I think they've been living in that fantasy with Blackthorne while Buntaro hasn't been there. They've been enjoying themselves. And now that Buntaro is there, it's like, oh, no, this isn't actually real. What is real is what Buntaro is bringing us, because outside of just like them and hanging out with Blackthorne, the whole world is still happening. Toranaga is still going to use them to die. There's still going to be a war. Can't start daydreaming and doing this dumb shit, because at the end of the day, we can die at any moment, but you need a purpose. So Get your head out of the clouds.
Right, because like, even Toranaga telling his prize samurai Todomoto, telling him go find another spy to give to Yabu. You know, I think he would have accepted if it was just throwing somebody literally under the bus, like you know, right? Like I don't
to do.
Yeah, like it was just like just figure it out. I don't really care how it gets done. And it happens that this guy, you know, is intelligent, smart enough to be able to pull something like this, which is kind of like a typical fun kind of like storytelling way. We've seen this a lot. Like I like when I saw that scene, it reminded me of Schindler's List. Yeah, Eamon with the little boy pointed that was the guy who stole the stuff, the one who Eamon already killed, right? Yeah, so I mean, Toranaga, he's a strategist. He's a businessman. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's like any kind of like emotions. I don't think that there are emotions swaying him, other than just being driven by this like honor of his promise to the Taiko.
And getting pissed off at his son for like being a shitty heir.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just like father upbringing. You know, honestly, that kind of mistake could get you killed. And so I think that the reaction is totally appropriate to really instill in your children, like when you need them to develop in a different direction, you're like, this was not it.
Right, but he showed emotion. So you said like he's pretty emotionless, doesn't act on impulse, but like he really does with his little son.
I don't think that's impulsive. That's just like,
well, he like pulled the reins. Like when he did that, he pulled the reins on the horse, and the horse like
he made right.
Horse.
Yeah, horses do. You're right.
Fucking horse.
Yeah,
the horse
you're right.
Like, I'm doing what I'm told, man.
You're fucking pulling it. I've got a stick in my mouth, asshole.
Yeah, and then he's like, dumb horses, they're worse than falcons.
Yeah, that's a good point. I totally forgot about that.
He's still just a man, Inez. It was really sad to see the gardener's shack. That made me so sad because we saw the other house that Yabu like destroyed in order to find the spy. And that was like a small house, and it's like in the mountains, right? Like it's raining, there's holes. It's just like not great conditions. And then when you saw like the gardener's living conditions, it was way worse. And we've only seen the gardener like at the house. I don't know why I thought like maybe he was better off than like other villagers. But it showed that no, he's been the worst off so far that I've seen. And knowing that he like, you know, has already been through so much in life, like talking about like how, you know, like they ate silkworms and flies don't kill you. So like this little pheasant that's just hanging out there, like everyone needs to just stop complaining about it because it's like it's nothing, you know. Like he made all these comments. You already knew, at least me, I was like growing attached to this beautiful wonderful man who's also has this history and still has this kindness and this softness that you have to admire and love and appreciate. And then like those were his living conditions. I think that they did that on purpose, and it did effectively make me very sad.
I wasn't so affected by it. I was reveling in the twist, the effective use of the death that I did not see as part of some greater plan. But I can accept that might be the case. Why would he just have one spy in that town?
Hey, Paul, is this an off-screen death? Do you think the gardener's alive?
I do not think the gardener's alive.
Maybe. I'm going to say yeah.
You're pulling for the doctor.
No, Fuji would not be so sad. I wish. I did think that. I'm like, maybe Samuel. Maybe Samuel.
But we've great.
We've kind of made it all the way to, because our final scene, right, is Lady Oshiba, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, talk about a turn of fucking events too. Like they're just making me feel so many different like roller coaster ride this episode.
Now,
you want to dive into that?
Well, this was just like I explained earlier. This was a scene that I had no idea was coming. I have no idea what they're doing with it, but I am super interested to see because so far women have not been given any leash really to set their own destiny, and somehow there's this woman. Yes, she's the Taiko's consort, the heir's mom. Don't want to risk angering the heir by doing something bad with the mom. So, you know, you gotta listen to her. But it's almost like the men have no idea what to do with her because it's so unusual to give a woman that much consideration.
He wanted her back.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
there's
So,
that.
yeah, he wanted her back, but yeah, you're right. It was kind of like immediately I felt like the presence, the dynamic was, I don't know, it was the smallest that I had seen Ishido this entire season.
For a guy that wants to run all of Japan to get bossed around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just the smallest I'd ever seen him. And I was like, wow, she's has some power that she's wielding here. And I would say, like, this actress, wow, her scene was stunning. Her acting was just so perfect. Her voice, the way that she moved her voice, the way that she spoke, it was just so smooth and silk and regal. And I was, oh, it's so great. I wanted more of her.
It is pretty fantastic that her presence, right, is memorable. She makes quite the impression, and she's barely in any of the series.
She's making the most of the few lines she was given, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
It is interesting. They've really foreshadowed every episode with the last episode. And I was wondering, like, okay, maybe I haven't been trying to guess what the next episode would be like. But this time I thought, okay, maybe I should, because so far there has been very, very, like, apparent foreshadowing. I don't know. Yeah, after watching this, I'm like, I don't care. I'm just going to go wherever it takes me. Obviously, we're going to see something with Lady Oshiba establishing some form of dominance, but also I was really confused because Toranaga said that he was worried that the regents would want to kill her, but then when she comes out, it does seem like Ishido is going to actually listen to her. But is that like a long game? Is that a game that he's playing? Because so far, everyone's kind of a trickster. Ishido has been the only one that's been absolutely transparent about everything. So does he even have cards that he's not showing us? I'm really curious as to them. I'm just suspicious of them. We've seen everyone plot except for Ishido. So I hope that we see some of that in the next episode.
Yeah, I think the only thing that we can take for granted as a card that he has is that he's got a lot of guys. You don't get to be one of the 5 regents without having made a convincing case to the Taiko that you are a threat, basically, that needs balancing with these other regents. So I'd bet he has thousands of guys willing to die.
They said he was the most powerful, that he had the biggest army.
I think that's probably right.
We haven't seen it. So, yeah, I don't know how significant they're going to make him later on. So I think that we're going to have to see more of what Ishido has to offer, especially since his guy, Jozen, is handed over to him like a little present, right? That's not okay. You know, he's done a lot worse over a lot less.
Last week we talked about that it would be okay if they wiped out Jozen's team, if they kept the silence, you know, right, or, you know, they strategize. Yeah. So who do you think sent that head? Was it Toranaga, like, trying to own it? Or was it Yoshi Jr.?
I think it was Yoshi Jr. I think they finished all that up before Toranaga showed up.
Oh, man. Well, let's see. Like you mentioned about the scene that I missed at the beginning of the episode.
That one.
Where the commoners were cleaning up the body parts. So somewhere in there, maybe there's another source in the village. Well, I mean, it could be. That'd be riskier because Yabu's land is more or less Toranaga's land, the way that the reporting structure seems to work. So it'd be much riskier for Ishido to have a guy there, but not impossible. But you're right. It probably is just an honor thing. It probably is like, well, we killed him. Like, we got to tell.
Yeah, it's probably that. But you're right. There are spies everywhere because that's why Ishido's always showing up.
Right.
I'm so interested. Gosh, but I'm exhausted.
I know. I mean,
it just took me out.
I kind of think that what I've been reading past the earthquake might be a part where they need to start diverging from the book, maybe speeding things up a little bit because it's very fillery what comes up next. in the book. So I am anxious to see what they're going to show us on TV, because that stuff, yes, it does expand the love story a little bit, but the way things leave off in this episode, there's not much love story to expand. So it would be very abrupt if it started just next episode.
Oh, you mean with Mariko and Blackthorne?
Yeah, I mean, she was like, the only words we'll be sharing are the ones I'm translating to you or whatever. I know that she broke that right away.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately.
And then the landslide happened. So that did change things because he was kind of an anomaly. Like, he brought Toranaga back and everyone's grateful. And that was another thing. She was really, really worried and concerned. It's crazy how much love and admiration she actually has for Toranaga despite everything.
Blackthorne, with his gift of the worthless swords, he remembers.
Oh, that was huge.
Somehow that a samurai cannot be without his swords.
What do you mean somehow? That was so significant. Of course you remember. Did you forget, Paul? Because I remember.
I don't know that I would be thinking about it right then.
Oh my goodness.
But then he started looking for his swords, and I might have gotten the context clues. But again, your heart's pumping, you're breathing hard. This guy just came back to life.
It was just me. I thought I saw Toranaga kind of give a smirk when he was handing him the swords.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because he knows the story of the swords?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%. But he's like, I do need some swords though.
I do. Yeah.
And then he said, thank you. I'm like, oh shit, you didn't have to do that. He's a nobody, Toranaga. You just had to say like, good, well done.
Well, I think there's going to be more prep coming up. There may be more rewards for Blackthorne for saving his life.
Oh, of course there will be.
But, I mean, we're halfway through now, right? There's only 10 of these.
Oh, there's 10? Good. I thought there were 8.
But that means we got to start sliding down towards that climax. And that...
I'm like scared. It's so good.
Will the battle come to them? That's what they wanted. That's what they say they wanted. Rather than going attacking the castle, they wanted them to have to work their way through Toranaga's lands, which they know and they can defend.
And they'll entrench themselves. And all of the tactics and strategy and the hiding is going to be really crazy.
Well, sounds like we are all tuckered out this week. So if you've enjoyed our podcast and all of our theories, mostly Gabby's theories and observations this week.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I have to admit, I was low on theories this week, and you more than made up for it.
It was amazing. There's so much, and I could keep talking about so much more because it is everything, every scene. Every photo is like such an amazing work of art. I applaud this episode so much.
If you'd like to hear us talk about it, please consider subscribing on iTunes, or turns out maybe we're not on Spotify exactly yet. You'd have to subscribe to the Pod Clubhouse feed on Spotify to get it, or you could go to YouTube and find us, or consider joining our Facebook group, the Tales from the Shogunate, a companion podcast on Facebook, or we'll be back next week and we'll be all rested up and ready with more theories and whatnot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.
Pod Clubhouse.